Okay, now I'm having a great chat. I'm sure it's going to be a wonderful chat with conductor-composer Dominick DiOrio, and it's going to be about your new album with Notice. You're going to tell us about this vocal ensemble based on the Greek god of the south wind. Uh, it's the Indiana University Jacobs School of Music Vocal Ensemble, and it's dedicated to the study and performance of vocal repertoire since 1900. That gave you a nice out, going back that far. This, what I mean is, this is this 2022 Nirvana Records release, and it's like in your face. It's right on the cover of the CD. It says, "What is ours? Music from an America in progress." And by the way, the kind of special guest artist is Roger Rowe, English horn faculty, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
he's English horn faculty, and he also plays in the Indianapolis Symphony for a few decades now.
Okay, thank you. Fabulous performance. So you pulled in the best.
Yeah.
And so I guess I might just kind of stop there, and we can kind of get a little focused, because I do need to know the message, and that it's reasonably obvious, but also the arc of how you put these particular pieces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I think. 9, and one has two tracks on it. Composers, wonderful composers, including, as I understand it, a student, a grad undergrad who won the 2020 something or other award. I got it down on my notes lower down. But the arc of this program, the wheres and why fors, give us it was released in 2022, but we all know, because the entire planet, including the dolphins and whales, went through COVID, and we don't want to go back there, but we need to, especially in retrospect as creative artists. So tell me, what is ours?
Yeah, thank you, Dan.
What got that to do? Yeah,
and so Notice, the Indiana University Contemporary Vocal Ensemble, has been around for 40 plus years. And in 2020, we were supposed to go to New Zealand to represent the U.S. as one of 4 choirs from the U.S. At the International Federation of Choral Music's World Symposium on Choral Music, the 12th one. And we were going to bring a program that represented America broadly, right, both in terms of subject matter and demographics of composers. And this recording was supposed to be drawn out of that. But as you know, best laid plans don't always happen, and the world shut down, and we did not end up making a New Zealand trip. But the monies we had raised for the project, of course, were still grant funds that we wanted to use. And we wanted to, at the very least, capture, in many ways, some of the composers we had hoped to feature at the symposium, and also to respond to what it meant to be told that the thing we do every day is now the most dangerous thing we could do, that, breathing and singing and all of that could make people's lives worse, right? And we think of choral singing as a medium that's used to heal, right? To
ironic.
Comfort, and to connect with people's emotions and values. And so what is ours is an attempt to reclaim some of what we lost in many ways. It's an attempt to say, even though this opportunity did not happen, we still want to make an artistic statement about what it means to come back from danger in many ways, to come back to activity that we love. And we wanted to do so by representing broadly American choral composition today. And so we do have some current and now alumni students from the Jacobs School of Music, Leah Amick, Night Sky Songs, and John William Griffith. First Light, both of them were undergraduates who were singing in the ensemble when we were supposed to travel, right? And we wanted to feature their pieces. And those 2 pieces were actually recorded in February 2020. And I remember 2 members of our tenor section at the time were coughing and hacking, and we just assumed, they were, going through normal respiratory things. In retrospect, they were probably sick with COVID, and we didn't know it yet. But we have those 2 recordings on this album from February 2020. And they're the only 2 tracks with the chorus that are performed without masks. Because all the other works we recorded in January 2022 when we were still under pandemic restrictions. And so the recordings you hear on tracks 1 through 3 and 8 through 10 are all in masks, if you can believe it, right? All of that is sung.
Let's just stop for a minute, because you've just blown my brains out. But also, did I introduce you properly? I mean, you are conductor and composer. Did we do that whole thing? Member of the choral conducting faculty?
I'll say it again if you'd like. I conduct the
2012, anyway.
And my name
You're
is Dominick.
professor of choral. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. Anyway,
Yeah.
so I just want to kind of get that cleared up. But you explained a lot about notice, the level. And I know
Yeah.
of a choir here in Santa Barbara that is that it was the conductor died, but the point is she kept her alumnus for decades, and they eventually founded a kind of an adult survivors of her choir training. It was superb. So that explains to me the just evenness of the mastery of the singing and the soloists and all the rest of it because you have such a pool.
Yeah, and if you can believe it, notice as an ensemble, it is a curricular ensemble of the IU Jacob School of Music. So these are all students required to be an ensemble, right? But these students range from first year undergraduates through doctoral students. And we run the gamut of people, everywhere in between. It's about half undergrad and half graduate. And then in terms of major, they're all music majors, but
It would have to be, yeah.
only about a third of them are voice majors, and about a third of them are composers, and then the other third are organists and conductors and pianists and musicologists and theorists. Occasionally, we have a violinist in the group. We have a violist as well right now. So, and we do sometimes have non-music majors as well. If they audition and can pass the sort of high musical bar for entry, then they can be admitted. And in the past, I did have one student, I believe, who was a BA in economics or something like that. Not in recent memory,
Wow.
but that does happen, which is amazing.
Well, for the School of Music, I guess what I started to say a little earlier is that what I was more or less aware of is that if you're a serious School of Music, you do not let non-majors in at all. And I've always thought that was just wrong-headed, frankly.
Yeah, we certainly let them in.
Yeah.
That we have nothing against them, and we welcome anyone to audition for the choirs. And we have many ensembles in which there are non-majors who participate, right? So I think that's normal at the Jacob School. But we also are a school of 1,600 music students. We're one of the largest schools of music in the world, right? And certainly one of the largest in the U.S. next to UNT. We tend to go back and forth. And we have over 200 music faculty, full-time music faculty, to give you a sense, right? There are adjuncts too, but those are the full-time numbers, right? So it's a big place. It's like a small city's worth of musicians who are training to be great. And from that pool, we audition and place about 36 to 40 students into notice. And that is an ensemble that was originally the Contemporary Vocal Ensemble by name. It used to be called CVE, the acronym, at IU, and I didn't think that acronym was helpful. And so when I came in, I rebranded it and renamed it, and started to create a new profile for the group. And while we do occasionally do works from the last 100 years or so, we try and do works of living composers who are still working, still living and still producing art. And so this album is all living composers, right? And some of them are associated with IU, like John and Leah, like I said. Also Maura Smiley, whose work Why Are You Here was commissioned by us. She's an alumnus actually of the early music program. Right, and yet she's also a folk artist and composer and song leader. Awesome
so
person.
Important to be that broad. It's so important to have a broad and diverse capability and interest. Yes. Let me just run through the composers just to show, because again, people that are going to be watching this are faculty, college faculty, looking for repertoire. I presume.
Yeah.
So we got and we'll go down to these pieces in a bit, but just a kind of just an overview: Carlos Cordero, Andrea Ramsey, Rena Ismail, John William Griffith. Leah Hammock. I hope I'm getting there close. Yourself, Maura Smiley, Joel Thompson, and I'm sure people are certainly they are not so familiar, going, "Oh, who?" It's like, who? But that's exactly what we're looking for. That's exactly what we're trying to put out to certainly to other college vocal faculty who are looking for repertoire. So it was a. By the way, what I discovered, I think you and I have spoken before. At one point, we were ready to go, whatever that's been. The weeks fly by, and it didn't quite come off. And so today was my refreshing visit to the album, and sure enough, it's a virtuoso album, all right. So, I want to make sure people are clear, especially faculty, that this repertoire is fabulous, especially the a cappella pieces in terms of interest at the collegiate level, but they're all very, very virtuosic, and which is good. Why waste time, frankly, teaching students garbage? What can I say? Okay, So,
Yeah, that's really important to me that the students are given repertoire that is compelling, that can inspire them, that can challenge them to learn new techniques and I think part of my agenda and philosophy are that we have a lot of composers at the Jacob School of Music, something like 50 student composers, 8 music composition faculty who are excellent. And my job, I think, as part of my role, since I'm not in that department, is to project an image of the broad diversity of choral new music being written, right? Because there is so much variety, even just in the U.S., to say nothing about what's going on internationally. And I think that's part of my charge, right, is to represent broadly the best of new American choral music. And I see that as
and
sort
by
of
the way,
the missions of the ensemble.
okay. And by the way, you're making us me in particular, very, because I'm a graduate of the California Institute of the Arts and Trinity College of Music and stuff, all good place, perfectly good places. But you just reminded me why, as a youth, I dreamed about going to your campus for that real reason, to be amongst 15, 1600 music majors. It's just
Pretty awesome, right? Bloomington, Indiana is not a big city, but the School of Music has a big city's worth of resources of students
oh
and
yeah,
faculty. It's truly an international gathering place
oh yeah, yeah,
for the best
without
of musical arts.
yeah. So there you go. And let's kind of, I'm going to get back on my schedule just a little bit.
Hmm.
Corny it may be, but you were at Indiana University. Did I get that right this time? I usually get it
Hmm.
the other way around. Thank you.
Yeah,
In other words, you were in a privileged position as far as I'm concerned.
absolutely.
Tell me the backstory. Because we've all been there. I'm a conductor, once
Hmm.
upon a time. But the point is that I had a moment. Most of us have a moment where it's just there's no other choice. Tell us your story.
Yeah, so I came to music somewhat late. As a professional, I decided to apply to colleges only in my junior year of high school, and I went to Ithaca College for composition, and then I sort of was awakened in me an interest in conducting there, and I applied to Yale for master's in conducting, choral conducting, and then I stayed there for my doctorate. Moved to Houston in 2009 to work at a community college in North Houston, Lone Star College, Montgomery. Taught there for 3 years while finishing the doctoral requirements for the Yale DMA in conducting. And then in that November, I applied for an opening at Indiana University, which was to hire, I remember it said both junior and senior applicants are welcome, and multiple applicants may be hired from this posting. And I thought, they'll never hire me, I'm 27. and
Uh-huh. Well,
uh,
quite a good thought. That makes sense.
yeah, and yet, I had a strong background in both composition and conducting, and one of the things they were hoping to fill was to find a conductor of this ensemble. Right? They were hoping to build a team of choral colleagues, and this is still true now, 12 years later. A team of faculty in the choral conducting department that are all full time, that all have different expertises. My expertise when I was hired was to be the new music person, right? And my composer conductor hat was part of that. Other colleagues were hired to be the symphonic chorus person and the opera chorus person and the pop commercial contemporary music person, right? And the early music person. So we had, at that time at my hiring, a choral faculty of specialists rather than the hierarchy you usually see of a director of choral activities and a second in command and a choral music ed person like many schools of music have. We weren't interested in that hierarchy because we wanted to prepare our master's and doctoral conducting students for the realities of the profession, which are, as a conductor, you may be asked to do lots of things. And so it was our now sadly late deceased chair at the time, William Gray. It was his idea to build this program of 5 choral faculty with specialties in different areas of repertoire. And that's persisted, right? And it's allowed us, I think, to create a unique choral program, a place that allows for a new music choir, right? Most places are going to have choruses that have to specialize, and for good pedagogical reasons, in repertoire across the spectra of music, right? But because we are such a large place and we have so many choirs, we have the resources with which to have a specialist ensemble, one that really can devote to something really specific and create, at least in academia, something unique, a new music choir at the collegiate level, right? We have some professionally, like the Crossing, of course, which are excellent, and others like that. But this is truly unique in the university setting, where you don't often see a new music choir devoted to the commissioning, the recording,
Yeah.
the preservation of music of living composers.
But you still did not answer my question. What I want to know is what happened. Was it age 7? Was it age 6? Was it in fourth grade, seventh grade, or what? I mean, were you a major in chemistry when you went to college and then found the discovery? Or
No, I was
what?
a major in music composition. So I played piano from when I was 6. My mother taught me up until a point. Then I took other lessons. Then I joined the high school marching band.
There we go.
I took
Now we get some dirt.
a music theory class my first year as a high schooler. And the band director heard me playing the piano, and he's like, "Do you want to play the marimba?" I'm like, "What's a marimba?" And so that
They're all like that,
interest in music more broadly. Then the year after that, I joined the chorus, which awakened my love for voices, which was only further awakened in college. And that's really it. I don't come from a professional music background. I come from a big family. Both of my parents are each one of 5 kids. I'm the oldest of 5 kids. So there was always a lot of activity in my life.
Is this a Middle West tale? Because
No.
What you just described was a high school, and you're certainly younger than I am, where you took theory. I took theory in my high school, but that was in 1963 when there was still something left of music education in the public schools. So
that was in New Hampshire. New Hampshire was where I went to high school, and I had a music theory class as a first-year undergrad, and then I was able to do an independent study in AP music theory in my senior year of high school.
Wonderful.
But I had to sort of create that curriculum for myself, or there was no one else taking it at the time. My high school was somewhat large. I think we had a total enrollment in the high school of 2,000, a graduating class of around 400, 450. And I know that my high school marching band went to the Rose Bowl, the Rose Parade, and marched in the Rose Parade here. And our marching band for that was 200 people, so it was not a small gathering.
Once again, first you've told me why I hate you, because of my lust all my life to go to your college. Never got there, but I'm happy now. And then you tell me about a marching band that you played in as a kid that had 200 players in it. My little high school band here in Santa Barbara maybe mustered about 50 people. And of course, I was the drum major, naturally, as a young conductor. But the point is, you've just killed me.
Well, when I played in that marching band, I played in the front ensemble, the pit, xylophone, marimbas, chimes, timpani. So I got a lot of percussion experience I didn't have, which has certainly helped me as a composer. But I wasn't going to march a timpani. I wasn't going to march a marimba. And I could not play a snare drum. So I had to learn the alto saxophone for 6 months to be in the Rose Parade, which is what I did. Right? I would not touch the alto saxophone today. But I also learned how to write for the alto saxophone by having to learn how to struggle through playing it. I did the same thing playing the trombone my senior year of high school, trying to learn for jazz band because there were no charts for the vibes that year, right? So I played third trombone, I think. So I learned how to do that. All of that informs my ability as a composer and a conductor, right? Playing a wind instrument, playing a brass instrument, playing percussion, playing piano. I never played a string instrument. I picked up a violin once and I went to play it and the bridge cracked. So I saw that as a sign and I put it back down. I conduct for strings these days, but I'm.
By the way, we will get to the album in a minute, I promise. But it's so interesting because when you look back on things, it's a miracle what you experienced in your high school. In a way, it's a miracle what I experienced as well, because the other band director here in Santa Barbara, the guy that I had, was horrible. He's gone now, so I hope I don't offend any living relatives. But just how when some people just have no control over high school kids, you're done. That's it. And this was my guy. So I went over across town to a high school across town where Henry Brubeck conducted the band, brother of Dave Brubeck. So and thus learned things. I did take fiddle up for a while. Boy, that's a hard instrument.
Well, and you say something really important because right now I teach here at IU. In addition to doing this ensemble, I teach doctoral and master's level conductors, and I say to them, you have a pretty strong power and responsibility, right? Because we all hear stories about someone who was told at a young age, you don't have a good voice, don't sing, or will you be quiet here? We don't need you to sing in this. Right? You have the power to make someone think they can't sing for the rest of their life. That is a strong, awesome, terrible power. And our job as conductors, I think, fundamentally is to enable the people in the room to showcase their gifts and their talents as well as they possibly can, right? If I'm doing my job well, right, I'm decentering myself and allowing the ensemble to be its best, right? I'm creating collaborative experience that allows something to happen that can't happen with individuals, right? That's my job as a conductor. And that's what I see as like my ultimate calling. And this album is part of that, right? It's a calling about community. It's about connection. It's about reconnecting. For instance, Maura Smiley's piece, Why Are You Here, was written actually before COVID, what is all about the disconnection we experience in our devices. And we reinterpreted that for the pandemic. It was the only thing we virtually recorded before, like when we were in lockdown. The only thing we virtually recorded was Why Are You Here? And that's where the spoken voices are coming from. Even though the live recording of the musical part on this album was recorded in 2022, the voices are the students from lockdown in March of 2020. And so we overlaid two ensembles worth of singing for that track because their pandemic reflections were critical, I think, to understanding and trying to process what they were going through. Because virtual choir is not choir, right?
Okay,
Singing by yourself,
down here to find it.
Pillows.
Because I remember taking notes about this. Why Are You Here? Okay, hang on. This narrations over the string quartet in the beginning.
Yeah.
So what you're telling me, I of course didn't know that, but the narrations were recorded in 2020, and then the over track, if that's the right word. So this is quite an assemblage of earlier.
Yes, and the way we did it is to finish the ensemble, since we were no longer having classes for the last 6 weeks of the term, all of the students in the ensemble had to record their track singing for their grade, and they had the option of submitting spoken reflections as well. And then the engineer, Jamie Tagg, and I worked to place those things in. We sort of knit them over the music to create a spoken narrative out of their reflections. And hidden in there as well, it's hard to hear because I didn't want her to be focused, but Maura Smiley also submitted some reflections. So when it gets really cacophonous, she's also in there speaking too.
Okay, well, I think you just described an extremely complex piece. People are beginning to get the idea of how complex it is. In my little notes, I do this stream of consciousness stuff. And this is my notes from the last time I listened, and then today a little bit. But yes, I do have the note about the COVID-19 pandemic kind of interrupting things. But as I mentioned to you earlier, I'm not surprised, but I'm delighted actually that the sound of air is different in 2020 than it would be in 2022, and I didn't hear any. You know what I mean? It can be very, very clear. Not that it even matters, but the point, and also because these are texts overlaid, that helped a lot.
And one of the things Jamie Tagg, the engineer, and I talked about was, the students were recording on totally different devices when they were speaking. Some of them were using their phones, some iPads, some had like professional mics. And we wanted to preserve on the recording the different kinds of spoken microphone techniques, right? So when the voices come in, you hear different kinds of levels as they speak because we wanted people to feel like these things were coming in from lots of different spaces. And that also impacted the other track, number 7, It Takes Your Breath Away, which I wrote with Roger Rowe. And to say I wrote it takes some explanation, because what I did was I improvised 2 different piano tracks, and then I sort of overlaid them, myself playing the piano. And then I asked Roger to listen to those and to record himself playing the English horn any way he wanted. And then I took his improvisations, and the engineer and I layered those on top. And then from that track we created, I wrote a part for him to play live. Right. So that track we created was a tape part, and then he can perform this piece live with a part written above that. So if you listen to the quality of the English horn in this recording, some of them sound like they're from distant and far away. That's the recorded track. And some sound live, which was recorded live with him. Right.
Okay, let me jump in.
One more layer, because there's a poem, right? His family member, Margie McCrellis Rowe, who's a Norton Anthology poet, right? A respected published poet, wrote this poem, It Takes Your Breath Away, and he wanted people in his family to speak it. He wanted it to be a Rowe family experience. And so when he went home for Thanksgiving in 2021, he had Margie's poem, and he had each of them choose a line and just record like 4 or 5 seconds of that line. And then the engineer and I put that into the tape track, as well as Roger himself speaking the poem. So all of that it's a collaborative piece, right? I say when I talk about the piece that it doesn't feel right to have my name on it because it really is a piece that's created at so many levels by so many different people something like 15 different people, right, created the fabric and wovenness of It Takes Your Breath Away. And Roger can and has still performed it since then, right? It doesn't just exist in this recorded form. So everything but that live part is on a track that he can then play in a room and then perform live to, which he's done now 3 or 4 times.
Basically, you thought of everything, and not only that, it'll perpetrate this piece. You know exactly what you're doing. You know what I mean? Because you just described it. You prepared this as an electronic piece with live music.
Yeah.
If I understand you correctly. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
and this is related to another project I did because I'm also the artistic director of the Mendelssohn Chorus of Philadelphia, used to be called the Mendelssohn Club. And this year is our 150th year, so it's a big one. But a few years ago, when we were trying to come back from lockdown, I wanted to create a virtual chorus experience that was more accessible. And at that point, we had 67 chorus members all submit reflections, spoken and sung. And then I put that together into an album that's called Feather and Air, which was a 25-minute looping installation at the outdoor rail park in Philadelphia. Because in May 2021, we still couldn't really be inside, and so that was our first gathering with me as their artistic director live, was outside hearing their 25-minute repetitive piece, their words and their singing projected into this park, right? So this, It Takes Your Breath Away, followed that, right? So all 3 of these projects taught me something about creative activity as well as a composer, a different kind of composing than I had ever done before.
You take my breath away, frankly. Here's the thing. Some people reacted to that lockdown with coma. I don't mean the disease. I spent 2 years thinking I'm gonna get busy, and instead I stared out the window and looked out into the emptiness for 2 years. Others, such as yourself, and all the energy that you project, apparently went, let's go, let's do it, let's do this, and the other thing. And of course, later in assembling what you've just told me about, I've made notes here about what I was hearing, what you've just described. I figured it was deliberate, layering of tracks, but I didn't know the history. That you have just told us, and that's really
it's an artifact of the time. And if you listen to It Takes Your Breath Away, you'll also hear cicadas, because at that point when we were recording in 2021, that was the cicada season in Indiana. So I wanted to open and start the track with my, we were in our houses, we were stuck, but outside we have this burgeoning activity of things that have come up from the ground after their, hibernation. So it's really stunning in many ways. And
by the way, without interference from humans.
Sorry?
Excuse me. By the way, without interference by humans.
Right.
So was that a particularly crazy?
I was so happy outside at that point, right? Because everyone was in their houses. You mentioned I was creative during this time. I think that was in part because of the roles and responsibilities I saw that I had. In Philadelphia, for instance, I was in charge of this community of people that needed to be held together. They were used to coming together and singing on Wednesday nights. So for that year, 2020, 2021, we met every Wednesday night on Zoom, not to try and sing most of the time, but to have some kind of communal experience, to keep the community together. And that made our eventual return to singing even more powerful. As an educator, I had a responsibility to the students who were enrolling, in music school during the time when they couldn't do most of the music they wanted to do. And, I think IU responded to it in such a great way. That year, we actually had an opera season of 5 operas. They were on stage and they were distanced. Our choral activity became vocal chamber ensembles. We had no more than 12 people in a room, 10 feet apart each. It was awful, but it was something. And it was not at home singing in your closet. And I think that meant a lot to the students who were there. So I think part of the innovation that came out of this was the need to make sure we were doing the very best we could for the people we were serving, whether they were the community members in Philadelphia or the students here in Bloomington, Indiana.
Oh, you made a great connection there between the amateur adult choir, the Mendelssohn Choir, and your students. And you also reminded me that probably the best survivors of COVID were faculty. Because you did your thing, you carried on, you did it all with Zoom. Of course, there were all the restrictions and problems and so on and so forth. But those of us who were freelancers, we just everything just went dead. The entire performing arts just went dead for 2 years. So as I said, I at least sat and stared out the window, wondering what was going on.
Well, and we couldn't have said if it were not for students who enrolled, and so there were students who said, we want to come to music school this year anyway, and we were determined to give them the very best experience we could. And I think that's part of the ethos one has as a faculty member, right? One of service to make sure students are prepared for what comes next. And those students that we taught during that time probably saw more innovative solutions to problems and problem solving and ways to make a career in music than any others had before. And I think it was a very hard time for many, but also a very special time for learning.
Okay, now we have just finished an in-depth kind of discussion with revelation upon revelation of Morris Smiley's Why Are You Here? And by the way, it's a play on words, wire, W-I-R-E, you here. Fascinating. And so you have helped explain what I was hearing.
Yeah, and maybe
trying to figure out what it was about.
Maybe the way to go next is I want to talk through the narrative arc of the album. You alluded to this about 30 minutes ago. I never got to. So, the album opens with Carlos Cordero's Ayúdame, Help Me, right?
Stunning.
Do you hear me? Right, a plea for help from, he's Venezuelan American, and he's hearkening back to the humanitarian crisis in Venezuela that was happening, and is still happening, right, but was especially problematic in 2019 when he wrote the work. And I wanted to start the album with this because it's like, wake up. There's a bass drum hit, G minor. It's pretty evocative. And it ends with speech, right? And the use of speech on this album comes back many times. I wanted to use the voice both in its sung and spoken ways, right? And that is quite climactic in the sense that it embodies the frustration of what we've been through in the last few years, right, when the album was released. The second track, Andrea Ramsey's Stomp on the Fire, takes that frustration and makes it physical, right? There are actual clapping and stomping and movements, and she begins in D minor and ends in D major, so there's sort of a transformation as well from frustration to action.
It sounded it, yeah.
And that moves into Rina Esmail's Tutarana, which is also in D, right? Which is a sort of especially virtuosic play on Hindustani classical music syllables, that is then made playful, made singing, and made communal in the way the chorus performs it. Those three act as an arc of darkness to light, of down to up at their most basic. And then that is repeated in the three final tracks of the album as well, where we see Why Are You Here expressing the frustration, and then Joel Thompson's America Will Be, transforming the promise of America through 10 different languages into the hope for a better America, and then finally into my own piece, A Chain Is Broken, with Iranian-American poet Hashayar Tonakaboni's poem, Earth's Anthem, which is about his alienation moving here to the U.S. in the 70s, not understanding the English language. It opens with a soloist singing Persian, and the Persian language is like, oh, what is going on? Why do you understand me? What are you saying? What do you mean? And then eventually it moves from understanding and alienation into acceptance, and how understanding of language and of people and of connection leads one to a greater sense of understanding and justice, right? So that those arc of three pieces, those six pieces, of course, being the ones we recorded in masks in 2022, those two arcs were really important to us, right, to sort of frame the album, both moving from dark to light on those halves. And then in the center, we have the three works that are different, right? Two of which were recorded in 2020 and are the student works by Leah and John, First Light and Night Sky songs, again referencing darkness and light. And then the very specific to the pandemic, It Takes Your Breath Away, that we talked about a moment ago, which has no chorus, I should add. There is no chorus on it. It is just Roger and me. And
now that you mention it,
there is no chorus.
I'm a blank on that. Yeah, I'm just getting down to it.
In my mind,
you had me dancing all over I'm up and down on my notes, because there is so much to get to. So forgive me if you hear me, frantically trying to keep up with your conversation here. But which one? Where were we? The one that has no choir? Hang on.
That's It Takes Your Breath Away, the one with the English horn. So that is choir.
Okay. Well, yes, of course. Yeah, it's English horn. It's the narrator. And is that the poet or someone else? Who is that? That's the narrator.
The poet is speaking. Yeah, she is speaking her text. And we used her narration 3 times. At the beginning, it's normal. In the middle, it's distorted a little bit. right? As if the virus is attacking your lungs. At
Oh,
the end, it's almost unrecognizable. It's as if in the background and severely distorted, right? To show again a transformation of literally losing one's ability to speak, right? And of course there is no chorus on that, and yet it has a connection to the other things on the album because of the speech, because there's a chorus of speakers as we hear in Why Are You Here, the speech we hear in A Chain Is Broken, the speech we hear in Carlos Cordero's piece. Speech and singing is one of the things that links the album all together.
and do you sometimes overthink things?
Well, I believe my responsibility as a conductor is to compose a concert-length work out of other people's music, right? Is to create an arc that makes sense, to juxtapose.
Oh no, I didn't mean the about the arc of the album. I meant, are you one of those that kind of overthinks things? Because your explanations of your pieces in particular tell me that they are about 40 times more complex than I'm thinking they are on my second and third listening. See what I mean? So as a composer, even I have a feeling you revise and revise and then rewrite and then do, you know what I mean, over and over and or not.
I don't actually. I'm very lucky. I'm very lucky because I work now primarily on commission, and I've had something like 80 commissions in the last 15 years.
Wow.
Right, and so I don't have time to revise personally, but it's also not in my ethos. I think of myself like a bespoke tailor. Right, it's my job to deliver a garment, if you will, for an ensemble or for a group that fits them well. And then it's theirs. And I feel the same way about my music. Once I've finished it and delivered it, it now belongs to others. And if there are any lessons I learned from that, I'm not going to revise them in that work. I'm going to apply them to my next work. And so I sort of have a healthy, I hope, sense of disconnection from my music once
it's done.
Once it's published, so to speak, whether that publication, recording or sheet music or anything. But or once it's delivered may be a better way to say, because there will be little changes that the commissioner will request often. Oh, we don't have a bass with a low E flat. Can we take the low E flat out or something? Sure, no problem. Right, but
I meant your process. I meant your process. Does it take you long, and now you're going to break my heart once more, and tell me that you have perfect pitch, right?
I do not.
Oh, good. Oh, I'm so glad to hear that.
I do not have perfect pitch, although I teach an ear training for conductors course.
Yeah, so I mean, of course, relative pitch is but I was getting, you were going to destroy me if you told me that.
The way I'll say it is that I've developed perfect pitches, right? So now I can always find an A or find an F from my brain or a C, but I can't listen to music and tell you what key it's in or anything like that.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay, good. I feel much better. I feel like we can be friends now. Okay, good. Look, so much has been covered. We've now spent a lot of time on Maura Smiley's Why Are You Here?
Yeah.
Very, very interesting. I'm so glad to hear all of this minutia of how you put these pieces together. Very, very clever. That's what I meant about overthinking. It's like that's what I meant. I didn't mean just revising, and that's great. Finish it. Forget it. It's off. Next. That's the profession.
And there is a general key scheme across the pieces, as I started to talk about too, right? The first one starts in G minor, the third one ends in D major, the final piece ends in D. So there's a little bit of that, but it's not designed.
How about any kind of arc? And I know we're kind of getting dumb here about it, as in I don't want to talk it to death, the concept, but anything about a text, any kind of text flow of any sort?
Only in terms of sort of general negativity toward general positivity,
okay,
right? In
yeah.
the three arcs. But no, not really. And if we think of the album as in three large arcs, right? The first three pieces, the middle three, and the last three. The first three go negative to positive. The last three go negative to positive. The middle three go sort of positive to negative, right? In terms of I'd have to listen again. Very interesting. Very, very, very interesting. And I don't know. I would say the middle three are more ambiguous, except for It Takes Your Breath Away, which is clearly not normally, it's not the most positive of things. So.
Yeah. I want to talk about A Chain Is Broken.
Yeah.
Or I'd like to have you talk about A Chain Is Broken. But before I let you get carried away, I'm just going to look at my own notes, okay?
Sure.
What I want to emphasize is really the perfection of training, the amazing ensemble. So this choir is just extraordinary. I mean, here, there, everywhere, it's all exactly right. You know what I'm trying to say? Nothing is out of balance. I love a non-vibrato, which I'm sure I heard on several occasions to just that steady, clean pitch, and then of course vibrato for other stuff. I'm an instrumental guy, so I hope I haven't gotten in trouble yet. But it's just such a gorgeous choir of real. Let's just call them professionals. They're in training,
Yeah,
at least.
in my mind, they're pre-professional singers, right? These are people who will be professional singers if they wish to be, right? Many of them are voice majors. And vibrato is a persnickety topic when it comes to choral music, and especially in collegiate choral music, because there are really historic voice training programs that prioritize the bel canto singing style, right? IU is definitely one of those programs. We had one of the best opera programs in the world, right? 18 voice faculty members, right? Not a small number of voice teachers. And yet, at our point in this history, our choral department and the voice department have historically the best relations we've ever had, right? Cordial, professional, polite, which is not the case historically when you hear stories about people going, down to studios and yelling and right. And so part of that is because of the way we treat singers, right? We treat them as people who fatigue. We treat them as people who have opinions and thoughts and are learning something valuable and have something to bring into the classroom already. We don't assume a pedagogy where we are the maestro with all the genius and they have only to hear us to know things, right? That's anathema to what we teach. And part of my philosophy with Notice is that I want to prepare them to sing anything that they might see in front of them. And so that means some music will have more vibrato than others, and some will have less. And some dynamics naturally have less vibrato than others, right? If you sing softer, it will usually be less vibrato than when you sing louder, right? Same, I try and tell composers this too, right? So many composers try and write a crescendo for the chorus that moves like the orchestra, with the violins going up and the celli and bassi going down. Voices don't do that, right? When you want to get louder as someone who is a human, you scream, and no one screams in the lower part of their range. And yet so many scores I adjudicate and see every year show me a choral crescendo build with sopranos going to a high A and basses going down to a low F, which will never balance, right? And so part of my philosophy, right, is trying to teach the differences of writing, the idiomatic differences in writing for the chorus to make the chorus sound as good as possible. Right? And I'm uniquely poised for that as a conductor and composer, right? I deal with the problems from both ends, right? Both as myself writing them and originally unhappy with what I was hearing, right? Because of the way I wrote it. And composers giving me things that are just unreasonable and terrible, right? No one wants to hear a chorus sing a high B for 40 minutes pianissimo. That's a terrible idea. Why would you ever do that to people? Awful, right? What kind of demands would we ask of people? Would we ask a first trumpet, to play high Cs 18 times in a row for 5 minutes? No, terrible idea. Why would you do that to a human? Same thing, right? I want.
Well, Beethoven did.
Yeah,
Beethoven did.
Terrible idea. And a lot of singers hate singing Beethoven's music, right? And Fidelio, sure, it's an opera, but it's not the best opera. I mean, okay, I'm done giving my strong opinions. But
when does the lightning strike you dead? Okay, go ahead.
I know, right? But my point is that we have a responsibility as educators to prepare students as best as we possibly can for the realities of the world, in which they'll be asked to do many, many things. And that includes varied rates of vibrato. It includes especially, expressive singing, right? I actually talk about vibrato a lot less than you would expect from what you hear on the album, because a lot of what I talk about is line and phrasing, right? And I talk about direction. And in doing those things, it implies that you're thinking about how the phrase is moving, and that automatically changes how one sings. Because if one is not thinking about direction, you're just going to get a sound that is sort of romantic by definition, right? Consistent vibrato rate, no more, no less, right? And yet if you're moving to and from things, like in the light and shade, the chiaroscuro Baroque music or something, you will instinctively change the vibrato rate. You listen to any good cabaret or musical theater singer, they do the same thing, right? Listen to Maria Callas, and she will approach a high note in the same way. It's not that bel canto singing is always vibrate all the time. It's always been varied rates of vibrato, right? And we need the chorus to match that, right? To be able to be expressively nuanced in how we think about music. I would never want to release an album in which every single chord was senza vibrato. That to me is strange and weird and unnecessary, because that implies that all the composers that you're programming have the very same expressive palette. And I know that's not true. Or all the music has the same expressive palette, right? No.
But I do love but I do love in this album, there are clear, now again, I hope I'm not getting myself in trouble, but what I
You're
do
not
love are the non-vibrato moments, at least
totally.
in my definition, that just the beautiful, beautiful tone, not being disturbed in any way whatsoever,
Yeah,
which I hear occasionally in some of these pieces. I just love that sound in a cappella and choral music in general. So that's what
totally.
I think.
And that is beautiful, and that's the thing. So the idea that that's not acceptable in choral music is terrible. Like that's unrealistic, and we hear it everywhere. And yet at the same time, vibrato is passionate and moving and bracing at the best times. Right? All of these are expressive tools in our toolkit, and we need to be able to use them and deploy them if we're going to have a choir that can deal with whatever new music is thrown in front of us. If we have a
For example,
12-part, for instance, if all 12 notes are in it, if there's a lot of vibrato, you're not going to hear all 12 notes.
exactly
You're going
right.
to hear everything in between, right? So the music will make demands on what we have to do technically.
Yeah, and also soloists, of course, are going to have an expressive vibrato and so on, as they do in this album. Your soloists are glorious, really. So they were
Yeah.
probably post-grad singers, I presume, something
There,
like that. Even alumni.
most of them are graduate students, but not all of them. I'm just
Ah,
looking right now. Jenna Kreider is a doctoral student. She was a master's student then. Liz Culpepper was a master's student. Elizabeth Queen, master's. Nick Sienkiewicz was a master's choral conducting major. Chase and Deeper were both master's students. Yeah, mostly graduate singers.
uh-huh. Because you mentioned alumni, and I kind of figured maybe the soloists were a little older, a little more experienced.
No. All of the singers on the album are current students at the time of recording.
Let's talk about A Chain Is Broken a little bit, because the reason is, I'm just kind of keeping track of time here a little bit, but the reason is it's such a complicated and interesting and fascinating narrative,
Yeah.
if you will. I mean, including the narrator himself, but this idea of the way the piece begins in whispers.
Mm-hmm.
I loved that. And then there's this more clearly enunciated chatter. It's very dramatic, and it gets, and
Mm-hmm.
as you know, it gets more and more and more agitated. It just has so much expressivity and so much going on. You want to talk?
Yeah.
It's yours, so talk to me a little bit about A Chain Is Broken.
Sure, absolutely. And there are two broad sections, or two broad characters, right? The opening character of alienation, where we have the soloist in Persian gradually moving into English, and all the chorus is whispering English around him, right? And then
The confusion of being in a foreign place where you
yeah,
don't
of just feeling like you have no idea what's going on around you. That was what we were trying to paint very expressively, right? In gorgeous high tenor solo voice. Again, we're at IU that has an amazing voice and opera program. We should showcase the amazing voices that come out of that program, right? And then it moves into something which is much faster, much more articulate, much more almost anxious, and I would say, but is also clearly groove based, right? Comes out of sort of popular music grooves, right? Eventually moving almost to a more pop music declamation by the
rhythmic and propulsive
nature.
section. Yep.
Yeah. Right? It's very percussive, right?
Irresistibly rhythmic, I see in my notes here. Irresistibly rhythmic, exactly the
Yeah.
intention.
Part of that is the poem, because the poem has so many words, right? And one of the hard things as a composer that deals with texted musics is that you have to deal with your text. And the longer a text you have, the more music you have to write, or the faster music you have to write, right? I still wanted to write a piece that was less than 5 minutes or just about 5 minutes. So I had to get through text pretty quickly, and I had to make sure I was able to do that, right? And so that's one way to do it. But also I knew I wanted to write a piece that would end the album and the concert, and originally our conference performance, that would put together so much of the themes of the other repertoire, right? About moving from singleness to community, from moving from darkness to light, moving from alienation to togetherness. All of that was what I wanted to capture in this. Cash, Hashiar Tonakabone, the poet, is a published novelist, but he was actually before that a professor of optometry at the optometry school here at Indiana University. He retired a few years ago. He retired September 2020, so right as the pandemic, I think, was doing that. But he is a family friend, right? He's been my husband's best friend for 20 years. And he wrote a poem for our wedding. So this was a way as well to feature him and his experience moving from Iran to the US, and to capture that in poetry and then capture that in music. right? That was part of the motivation, and to connect that to the American experience, right? Right. The Joel Thompson's piece, "America Will Be," quotes the Statue of Liberty text, right? "Give me your tired, your poor," and then we hear in the next piece, "And the chain is broken," an immigrant experience, right? That is part of what I wanted to capture in originally going to New Zealand to tell a story about America, right? Music for an America in progress, right? Music for an America that continues to welcome, we hope, right? Those who are disadvantaged, those who need refuge. And that was part of the message we wanted to share when we were originally going abroad for an international conference.
Yes, amazing. Boy, you're so far ahead of me. I'm trying to catch up here.
Don't worry.
I think we've really touched on some very good stuff. Good material. I think what you've managed to describe in just your enthusiasm is the technique, the art, the process, and having these wonderful voices at your disposal to
yeah. And to give them a program that they can really sink their teeth into, right? So much of my programming is thematic programming, right? It's juxtaposing pieces next to each other to give them new resonance or new understanding, right? That's a large part of what I do, both here and in Philadelphia, both of my jobs.
Very important. It's very important. Programming.
Totally. Yeah, because if we're going to bring in listeners who may not understand why they should hear Beethoven or Haydn or Rina Esmail, right? We need to give them something maybe extra musical to understand first, right? To say, oh yeah, maybe I do need to think about the meaning of America, right? What does it mean now? Has it changed, right? You know, what is happening in our government? What is our responsibility as citizens? Is this something to protect, right? All these are questions that can come up in listening to repertoire like this. And those are questions that I think we need to have as a society, as a citizenry, right? To imagine, and especially the younger minds, right, learning about this, to imagine the next phase of our world, of our country.
Let me just jump in with something that is just my catching up with you. Your energy is just amazing. But you know what? You are in such a lucky. I am sometimes get very down about the decline in education in our country, and public education is in deep trouble. So, and you in your position at your university are surrounded by all this incredible talent. So therefore, indeed, you have an even more important responsibility that you are fulfilling very well. Because if there's a mind that works, you've got to teach it too.
The inspirational teachers and musicians and artists of the next generation, or there will be no more music, in no small way. And I don't laugh because I find it funny. I laugh because I find it hysterical and problematic, right? Because it's hard to convince people to go into music education if they're looking at a $38,000 starting salary and having to teach the test and losing school time and only meeting twice a week because of block scheduling, right? You really need to inspire that person to know they want to make a difference in someone's life if they're going to go through that kind of hell. And that's part of my job and my colleagues' jobs, is to say, look, if you are committed to this, if this is the thing you feel in your soul and your bones, we will give you all the tools you need to do it as well as you possibly can, so that you can continue to inspire people through your art and what you do. Because that's critical for what we do, for making sure music retains its role as a vital, life-giving force for change and good.
Yeah, also, just to I'm trying to catch up in my head with what I was going to ask you in the course of this past hour, based on what you had, said. Help, I want to, about preparation, about preparing these people. You made it, these young professionals. You made it very clear, because, as you know, in the profession where you make the good money, you sit down, you read it, it's done.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They have to be absolutely prepared to walk in cold and do it. Not like, can I come back next Tuesday? Can we have another, So you made it clear that that's
one
the point.
Of my soapboxes is that I believe the standards that instrumentalists are held to are much higher generally than the standards singers are held to. Right? And I believe that singers should be held to the very same standards as the principal oboist in the symphony, right? We shouldn't have to teach the part to the singers in the chorus. Singers should come ready to sing. They should come knowing their part and preparing their part, or at least able to read their part as well as they can. And that should be the professional expectation for any professional singer. And yet, of course, because of the way our world works, so many singers go through high school not learning to read music at all. And so they come to us newly ready to start their voice degree, and they can't tell the difference between, an eighth note and a 16th note, right? And that's something that is sad to me. And it's because of the state of education, as you talked about. And yet it's such an easy thing to fix, right? Because we can teach people these skills. We can hold them, right? The oboists and the trumpet players and the violinists are coming in able to tell these things, right? So the singers should be able to too, right? And so that's something that gets to the heart of how we train and what we hold as values. Right. And of course, when you have an opera system of repetitors that is designed to help people learn their part who don't know how to read music, then we're perpetuating that problem. Right. So how do we train the next generation of singers to be like the 36 I have here, right, that are ready to take on music that is inherently challenging, comes with complex problems, just like our instrumental new music ensembles, right? We need people working at that level because they will inspire those that come after them.
And I thought I was in trouble with instrumentalists. I think what you've just told me is maybe vocal people are even more in need of this kind of training. I hope I'm not getting in trouble here. And it hadn't quite occurred to me until you just brought it up. But again, yeah, we're facing a terrible emergency. Really, I've just seen a photograph that is horrifying of what is called the guitar orchestra at a particular high school in this neck of the woods down here in Southern California, and it's like appalling. We're talking about just this rabble of kids, I presume just faking it or something, and that's the guitar orchestra. And,
well, guitar ensembles can be great, and we have wonderful guitar ensembles here at IU as well, and they can be a way for people who already know they love something about music. They love playing the guitar. They love some of the songs they sing. They love songwriting. That's a way for them to get in the door, right? To learn more skills, to learn some literacy, right? To go beyond pop chord charts, right?
And of course, you're at one of the highest schools in the land. So I didn't mean to bring,
sure.
I didn't.
But I do believe that music making as an activity is a joyous one. Right. And there are so many different ways one can make music. And there are so many ways one can improve one's craft. Right. And I think part of the barrier we face is that people will be like, oh, I don't need to know that. I don't need to know how to know. I know my chords. I'm good. Right. But no, there's so much more possibility when we see, what can be taught, what can be learned. And it's our job as educators to open people's minds to realize that there's a whole world of possibility, of expression, of connection, of communication in front of them, if they're ready to accept the training that comes from hard work and discipline to learn those skills.
Yeah, exactly right. My example was a sad one because it makes me very sad when I see a high school in a small town where the best the music department can do these days is 17 kids goofing around on their electric guitars. And the whole scene made me clear that I didn't even see a chord chart anywhere. So in other words, there's a decline.
The good thing about choruses is that you don't have to spend a lot of money to purchase an instrument for a chorus, right? That people sing all the time. When there are protests, people sing. When there are weddings, people sing. People sing at birthdays, terribly often, but people sing. Singing is a part of life. And singing culture, developing a singing culture, developing a positive space for music making can be done with almost no budget, right? You have to pay someone to lead them, and that's critical. But, I think there are ways in which beautiful community music making can happen. And actually, choral singing is the #1 artistic activity taken by Americans. Chorus America did a study, Chorus Impact study a few years ago. 1 in 6 people in this country sings in a chorus. Right? When you step back and think about that for a moment, right? It's enormous, the impact that singing has on people's lives. And most of those people are not professionals, right?
Yeah, that's correct. So you have made my day better. Thank you very much. We missed anything before.
The positive impact of music making and communal singing. And I believe a choir can be a model for the best of society, right? A good functioning choir is people coming together for a common purpose. Differing beliefs, differing ideas, different values coming together for a common purpose. right? I would love to see that echoed in our highest halls of government. People coming together for a common purpose to do good things, right? To share good
It
messages.
used to be that way, once
right?
upon a time.
See, right? There should be a House of Representatives choir, right? If they all had to tune, maybe we'd pass some legislation.
That would be the baseball team. You know what I mean? There's the House of where they beat at each other with balls and clubs. So that isn't helpful. Anyway, enough of the silliness. What have I forgotten that you need to tell me in an hour and a half or less?
I want to acknowledge the wonderful work of Navona, the record company, in bringing this together, and it's a wonderful album. And I'm so proud of the 80 plus students and multiple faculty members that were involved in the creation of it, especially the engineer Jamie Tagg, who has just done incredible work. And my faculty colleague, Roger Rowe. I just want to, thank all of them, for the students across years, for their contributions to make this artistic product. Because, as I said earlier, a conductor is nothing by ourselves, right? We exist to enable the best in others, to help make something wonderful happen that can't happen individually. And that's true in this album, in this case, too. And I really want to thank you, Dan, for taking the time to help feature it this evening.
Well, thanks very much. But also, you've again hit on about 18,000 points, but we can agree the leadership in training is the most important thing. If a choir director doesn't know what he or she is doing in Libertyville High School in the middle of Michigan, nothing's gonna, nothing's gonna be. There will be no growth. So that's what I worry about. We're getting better. Let's go through it just very quickly. I'll just finish this wonderful chat. By the way, I love people that shut me up. It's just perfect because that's supposed to be all of that.
I get so excited about all this stuff. I can't help it.
Anyway, great, wonderful chat, and very, very, very informative for me because of the complexity of some of the pieces that you told me about and their constitution, if you will, how they were put together, not just compositionally, but just track over track, and this year and that year. I mean, it's fascinating. So a wonderful, wonderful CD we've been talking about. Conductor composer Dominick DiOrio. This new album that is put out by Notice, the wonderful, fabulous choir at Indiana University that's at Jacobs School of Music there that specializes in music after 1900, like the 21st century, maybe, mostly, whatever. Anyway, it's wonderful repertoire, and very supportive, as we will mention, and I'll put this all up at Performing Arts Review, and we'll send people to buy the CD. And also, Navona puts out, I always get that wrong. Give me, what is the album again? The label.
Navona, yeah.
Navona. I always get it backwards. I'm sorry, Navona, because you're fabulous. But, the what they put up is incredible with the notes and the tracks, and it's just and the interviews that they do and so on and so forth. So it's fabulous. I'll get all that up for this. But bottom line, this release, What Is Ours? Music for an America in Progress, with the incredible Roger Rowe, English hornist, as a guest artist on that piece that I forgot. That was kind of narrative, spoken word, improvised English horn, and so on. Anyway, it's wonderful, that piece. Basically, for those interested in having a look at this album, there's a lot of material here that I'll bet would be very interesting to a whole lot of faculty, and that's kind of what I'm getting. Get this music by these wonderful people performed, and the level, as I'll mention, when I get to writing the review, it really is stunning. Really, really is stunning. So, and you've explained how that all has worked. So it's quite amazing. Wonderful.
Thank you.
I think I'm done. So thanks very much. Great chat.
Thank you so much, Dan. A pleasure.